Waitress finds a Hell's Angel dumped like trash, and her life changes forever. Sarah Mitchell's feet ached as she pushed through the heavy glass door of Joey's Diner. The neon sign above cast a tired red glow across the empty parking lot. Her double shift had been brutal. Endless coffee refills, demanding customers, and a broken AC that left the whole place feeling like a sauna. She pulled her worn jean jacket tighter around her shoulders, protecting herself from the night's chill. The streets were quiet now. Most businesses closed for the night. Only the occasional car passed by, headlights briefly illuminating the cracked sidewalk ahead. Just 15 minutes until home, she whispered to herself, already dreaming of a hot shower and her comfortable bed. The streetlights flickered above, creating shifting shadows that danced across the storefronts. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. A crash echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by muffled voices. Sarah froze mid-step, her heart quickening. The sounds were coming from the alley between the old bookstore and the abandoned hardware shop. "Hello," she called out softly, then immediately regretted drawing attention to herself. The smart thing would be to keep walking, to mind her own business like everyone else in this neighborhood did. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the way the voices had suddenly gone quiet, or maybe it was just her inability to ignore someone who might need help. Sarah took a cautious step toward the alley's entrance. The shadows seemed darker here, more threatening. Her fingers wrapped tightly around her phone in her pocket, ready to call for help if needed. "Is anyone there?" she tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. The only response was the distant sound of a siren somewhere in the city. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she made out a shape on the ground, someone lying motionless among the scattered trash and broken bottles. Her breath caught in her throat. The figure was massive, a man, she realized, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the shadows. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, its screen casting a pale blue light over the scene. The man's face was a mess of blood and bruises. His leather jacket was torn, revealing intricate tattoos that covered his arms. One particular tattoo caught her eye, the distinctive emblem of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. "Oh God," she muttered, her thumb hovering over the 911 button. But something made her hesitate. If he was involved with the gang, calling the police might put him in more danger. And if whoever did this to him came back. The man groaned softly, his fingers twitching against the concrete. He needed help now. Sarah looked around the empty street, then back at the injured man. Making a decision that would change both their lives forever, she slipped her phone back into her pocket. She grabbed him under the arms, surprised by her own strength as adrenaline coursed through her body. "I must be crazy," she muttered, struggling to drag his heavy form toward her car parked just around the corner. Completely crazy. It took all her strength to maneuver him into the back seat of her old Honda Civic. His legs barely fit, and she had to push to get the door closed. Sarah slid into the driver's seat, her hands shaking as she turned the key in the ignition. As the engine sputtered to life, she caught a glimpse of the unconscious man in her rearview mirror. What had she gotten herself into? Sarah's old Honda Civic rumbled through the quiet streets, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, checking on her unconscious passenger. The stranger's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, his face barely visible in the dim light. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Her apartment was only a few blocks away, but the drive felt endless. Each red light made her heart race faster, afraid someone might see the injured man in her back seat. Finally, she pulled into her assigned parking spot behind the worn brick building she called home. The lot was empty, which was a small mercy. Sarah killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of the cooling motor and her own rapid breathing. Getting him up to her second-floor apartment was even harder than getting him into the car. She had to half-drag, half-carry him, stopping every few steps to catch her breath. His boots scraped against the concrete stairs as she struggled with his weight. "Almost there," she panted, fumbling with her keys at her door. Inside, She managed to lay him on her couch, his long legs hanging over the armrest. Under the warm light of her living room lamp, she got her first good look at him. He was huge, well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and muscled arms covered in intricate tattoos. His face, despite the blood and bruises, had a rugged handsomeness to it. A dark beard, flecked with gray, covered his jaw. He looked to be in his early 30s. Sarah went to her bathroom and gathered supplies: washcloths, bandages, antiseptic, and a bowl of warm water. Her hands shook slightly as she began cleaning the blood from his face. A nasty cut above his eyebrow would need attention, and his lip was split. Dark bruises were already forming along his jaw and cheekbone. "What happened to you?" she murmured, gently dabbing at his wounds. As she worked, she noticed more details about his tattoos. Some were typical biker imagery: skulls, flames, chains, but others seemed more personal: dates, names written in flowing script, what looked like memorial pieces. Each one told a story she couldn't read. He stirred under her touch, groaning softly. "Laura," he mumbled, his face contorting in pain. "I'm sorry, so sorry." Sarah froze, cloth hovering above his face. Who is Laura? A girlfriend? Wife? The pain in his voice made her heart ache unexpectedly. She finished cleaning his wounds and covered the worst cuts with bandages. His leather jacket was torn and dirty. After some hesitation, she carefully removed it, checking for other injuries. His black t-shirt underneath was relatively intact, though she could see bruising on his arms where he'd likely tried to defend himself. Through the night, she sat in her armchair watching him, unable to sleep. Every so often, he would mutter something unintelligible, his face twisting with what looked like guilt or regret. Sarah kept checking her phone, her finger hovering over the emergency call button. But something held her back. The police would ask questions she couldn't answer. They might assume he was dangerous just because of his appearance, his tattoos. And what if calling them put him in more danger? What if the people who did this to him came looking? Dawn began to creep through her window blinds, painting strips of pale light across his sleeping form. Sarah pulled her knees up to her chest, watching his steady breathing. What kind of life had led him here, to her couch? And more importantly, what was she supposed to do now? The morning sun filtered through Sarah's worn curtains, casting a warm glow across Jax's bruised face. His eyes fluttered open, confusion washing over him as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The unfamiliar ceiling, the soft couch beneath him, the smell of coffee in the air, none of it matched his last memories of the alley. He attempted to sit up, but sharp pain shot through his ribs. A groan escaped his lips before he could stop it. "Hey, take it easy," a gentle voice said. Sarah appeared at his side, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. "You took quite a beating last night." Jax blinked, trying to focus on her face. "You help me?" His voice was rough, throat dry. "Here." Sarah handed him a glass of water. Small sips. He took the glass with shaky hands, noting the bandages on his knuckles. "Thank you," he managed after drinking. "But you shouldn't have gotten involved. It's not safe." Sarah sat in the armchair across from him, wrapping her arms around herself. "I couldn't just leave you there. You needed help. Most people would have called the cops," Jax said, wincing as he shifted position. "Or just walked away. I'm not most people." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm Sarah." "Jax," he replied, then added quietly, "Jackson Hawk, but nobody calls me that anymore." Silence stretched between them for a moment. Sarah fidgeted with the hem of her oversized sweater. "Your injuries, they're from gang violence, aren't they?" Jax looked down at his tattooed arms, at the club insignias that marked him as belonging to a world he'd grown to hate. "Yeah," he admitted. "Been trying to get out, but it's not that simple. They don't exactly hand out resignation letters." "How long have you been trying to leave?" "About a year now." He rubbed his beard, a nervous habit. "Started seeing things differently after my brother died. Got tired of the violence, the constant looking over my shoulder. But leaving, it's complicated. Dangerous." Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Listen, I know we don't know each other, but you need time to heal. You can stay here until you're better." Jax's head snapped up, surprise clear on his face. You can't be serious. You don't know anything about me. I know you were talking in your sleep last night, Sarah said softly. About someone named Laura. About being sorry. I know you're hurt and need help. That's enough for now. The mention of Laura made Jax's jaw tighten. He looked away, staring out the window. You're taking a big risk, he said finally. I appreciate what you've done, but I should go. People like me, we bring trouble. People like you need a chance, Sarah countered. Stay, at least until those ribs heal. We can figure out the rest later. Jax studied her face, searching for any sign of fear or uncertainty. Instead, he found only determination and genuine concern. It had been so long since anyone had shown him real kindness without expecting something in return. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was like a lifeline being thrown to a drowning man. Why? He asked simply. Sarah shrugged, a small smile touching her lips. Because everyone deserves help when they need it, even tough guys with tattoos. Sarah rummaged through her bathroom cabinet, gathering supplies to tend to Jax's wounds. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out antiseptic and fresh bandages. This whole situation felt surreal, having a stranger in her home, especially one with such a dangerous past. This might sting a bit, she warned, dabbing antiseptic on a particularly nasty cut above his eyebrow. Jax didn't flinch, but she noticed how his jaw clenched. The morning light streaming through the window highlighted every bruise and scrape on his face. Up close, Sarah could see the story written in his scars, some old, some new, each marking a chapter of violence she couldn't begin to understand. I found some clothes that might fit, she said, nodding toward a pile of folded garments on the coffee table. They belonged to my dad before he passed. Jax's eyes softened at that. You don't have to dash. They're just sitting in a box anyway, she cut him off, focusing on cleaning another wound. Better than your bloodstained ones. The silence between them felt heavy as Sarah worked, broken only by the occasional sound of cars passing outside or the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. Jax remained still under her careful ministrations, his breathing steady despite the pain she knew he must be feeling. When she finished bandaging the last cut, Sarah stepped back. There's a shower through that door if you want to clean up. I'll make us something to eat. While Jax showered, Sarah busied herself in her small kitchen, throwing together a simple meal of pasta and sauce. The familiar routine of cooking helped calm her nerves, giving her something concrete to focus on besides the stranger in her bathroom. 20 minutes later, they sat at her tiny kitchen table, steam rising from their plates. Jax looked different in her father's old flannel shirt and jeans, softer somehow, less intimidating. His wet hair was combed back from his face, and without the blood and grime, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought. The silence stretched between them as they ate, both acutely aware of the strangeness of their situation. Sarah pushed her pasta around her plate, stealing glances at her unexpected guest. Finally, Jax cleared his throat. So, what's your story? Sarah looked up, surprised by the question. My story? Yeah. Why you're working at that diner? Why you help someone like me? He paused, his fork hovering over his plate. Who you are? Sarah set down her own fork, considering her words. It's not much of a story, really. I work at Joe's diner because it pays the bills, most of them, anyway. My mom's in Pine Grove nursing home. Has been for 3 years now, since her stroke. She traced the rim of her water glass with her finger. The bills keep piling up, and the diner job barely covers them. But it's steady work, and Joe's decent enough as a boss. And your dad? Jax asked quietly. Passed away 5 years ago. Heart attack. She swallowed hard. After that, it was just me and Mom. Then she had the stroke, and, well, here we are. What about your dreams? What did you want to be before all this? A sad smile crossed Sarah's face. I wanted to open my own cafe. Something small, but special, you know? The kind of place where people feel at home. She shrugged. But dreams don't pay medical bills. Jax nodded, understanding in his eyes. Life has a way of changing our plans. Yeah, Sarah agreed softly. It sure does. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Sarah's small kitchen as she poured fresh coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. Steam curled up from the dark liquid, filling the air with its rich aroma. Jax sat across from her, his large frame making her second-hand kitchen chair look oddly small. "Sugar," Sarah offered, holding up the sugar bowl. Jax shook his head. "Black is fine." He wrapped his hands around the warm mug, his knuckles still raw and bruised from the fight. "Thanks for the coffee. And everything else." Sarah settled into her chair, watching him over the rim of her mug. The man before her looked different now. Cleaned up, wearing her father's old clothes, his wild beard neatly trimmed. The dangerous edge was still there, but something else too, something vulnerable. "How did you end up in a gang?" she asked softly, surprised by her own boldness. Jax's fingers tightened around his mug. "I was young, stupid, thought I needed a family." He took a long sip of coffee before continuing. "My mom died when I was 15. Dad was already long gone. The gang, they seemed like they had all the answers." Sarah nodded, encouraging him to continue. "At first, it was just small stuff. Running errands, keeping watch." His voice grew quieter, but then it got bigger, more dangerous. "By the time I realized what I got myself into, it was too late to just walk away." "Did you try?" Sarah asked. A bitter smile crossed his face. "3 times. First time, they caught up with me in Nevada. Beat me so bad I couldn't walk for a week. Second time, made it to Oregon before they found me." He stared into his coffee. "Third time, that was the worst. They didn't just come after me. They went after people I cared about." Sarah's heart tightened in her chest. "That's terrible. That's why I stopped trying." Jax's voice was heavy with regret. "Figured it was better to just accept it. Be what they wanted me to be." He looked up at her then, his eyes filled with a pain that went deeper than his physical wounds. "But I'm so tired of it. The violence, the fear, watching my back all the time." Sarah reached across the table without thinking, placing her hand over his. His skin was warm and rough beneath her fingers. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Jax." He stared at their hands for a long moment. "Not everyone. Some of us, some of the things I've done. The fact that you regret them means something," Sarah said firmly. "It means you're not the person you used to be." Jax fell silent, but he didn't pull his hand away. The quiet between them felt different now. Comfortable, almost peaceful. Through the window, a bird sang, and somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Sarah studied his face, seeing past the tattoos and scars to the lost soul beneath. The dangerous man she'd feared in the alley seemed far away now. In his place sat someone who'd been hurt too many times, someone who'd lost his way but desperately wanted to find it again. For Jax, the warmth of Sarah's hand on his felt like an anchor in a storm. Her small apartment, with its worn furniture and faded curtains, had become an unexpected sanctuary. For the first time since he could remember, he didn't feel the need to watch the door or check over his shoulder. Here, with this kind-hearted woman who'd saved him from that alley, he felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. He felt safe. Sarah pulled her jacket tight against the evening chill as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Her feet ached from a long shift at the diner, but her mind was elsewhere. She called Jax 3 times during her shift, maybe too much, but she couldn't help worrying. The apartment was dark when she opened the door. For a moment, her heart stopped, thinking Jax had left. Then she made out his silhouette by the window, a massive shape against the city lights outside. "Jax!" She flipped on a lamp. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" He didn't turn around. Easier to watch the street this way. Sarah set her purse down and approached slowly. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Something was wrong. "Has anyone come by?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No." His voice was rough. "But they will. They always do." Sarah moved closer, close enough to see his reflection in the window glass. His face was drawn, eyes distant. The peaceful man from their coffee talk was gone, replaced by someone haunted. "You've been thinking about them all day, haven't you?" Jax nodded. "Can't stop. Every car that drives by, every voice in the hall." He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "I keep seeing their faces, thinking about what they'll do when they find me." "If they find you," Sarah corrected gently. He turned to face her then, his eyes full of pain. "You don't understand. They're not just some gangs, Sarah. They're everywhere. They have connections. People who owe them favors. And when they want something, he ran a hand through his hair. I never should have stayed. I'm putting you in danger just by being here. Sarah stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I made that choice, Jax. I knew what I was doing when I brought you here. Did you? His voice cracked. Because I've seen what they do to people who help runners. People who get in their way. He looked down at his hands, as if seeing something there that Sarah couldn't. I can't let that happen to you. You're too good. The way he said that last word, like it was something precious and rare, made Sarah's heart ache. She reached out and took one of his hands in hers. His fingers were cold. Listen to me, she said firmly. I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not letting you face this alone. Jax stared at their joined hands. Sarah, no. She squeezed his hand. You've been alone too long, always running, always looking over your shoulder. That stops now. Whatever comes, we'll handle it together. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Jax's fingers tightened around hers, and when he looked at her, there was something new in his eyes, a mix of gratitude and fear and something else, something deeper. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Any of it. Sarah smiled softly. Maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's just about accepting help when it's offered. They stood there by the window, hands clasped, while the city lights twinkled beyond the glass. Both knew this moment of peace couldn't last. The gang was out there, and sooner or later, they'd have to face that reality. But for now, in the quiet of Sarah's apartment, they had found something neither of them expected, a connection that felt both terrifying and necessary. The morning rush at the diner was in full swing. Sarah moved between tables with practiced ease, her coffee pot making endless rounds as regulars settled into their usual spots. Behind the counter, Jax wiped down surfaces with careful attention, his large frame somehow fitting naturally into the small space. Sarah couldn't help but smile as she watched him, despite his intimidating appearance. The tattoos visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves, the wild beard he'd tried to tame. He moved with a gentleness that surprised her. He'd been at the diner for 3 days now, insisting on helping out to repay her kindness. Order up. Kenny, the cook, called from the kitchen window. Sarah grabbed the plates, delivering them to a couple in the corner booth. As she turned back, she caught Jax's eye. He gave her a small nod, a gesture that had become familiar between them. The morning passed quickly, settling into an easy rhythm. Sarah found herself relaxing, almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought Jax here. It felt normal, right somehow. The shrill ring of the diner's phone cut through the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations. Sarah reached for it, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Good morning, Sunnyside Diner, she answered cheerfully. There was a pause, then a low voice spoke. We know he's there. Sarah's hand tightened on the receiver. Her eyes darted to Jax, who was arranging clean cups on the shelf. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Listen carefully, sweetheart. The voice turned cold. Your little act of charity? It ends now. Tell Hawk he's got until tonight to come back, or things get ugly. Real ugly. Sarah's throat went dry. Who is this? You know who we are. Another pause. And if you're smart, you'll remember what happens to people who get in our way. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. The diner's usual sounds seemed distant now, muffled by the rush of blood in her ears. Sarah. Jax's voice startled her. He'd moved closer, concern etched on his face. What's wrong? She replaced the phone with trembling hands. They know, she whispered. They know you're here. The color drained from Jax's face. He glanced around the diner, as if expecting to see gang members bursting through the doors. I have to go, he said immediately. Right now. No. Sarah grabbed his arm. That's exactly what they want. You don't understand. His voice was rough with fear. Not for himself, she realized, but for her. They weren't making idle threats. They'll hurt you, Sarah. They'll destroy everything you've built here. I'm not letting you go back to them. Sarah's grip tightened on his arm. She could feel him trembling beneath her fingers, though his face remained stoic. Please, he begged quietly. I can't be responsible for anything happening to you. Not after everything you've done for me. Sarah looked up at him, seeing the torment in his eyes. The diner had gone quiet around them, the regular customers sensing the tension but pretending not to notice. "We'll figure something out," she said firmly, though her heart was racing. "Together. But I'm not sending you back to them." "I won't." Jax stared at her, conflict clear on his face. The threat hung heavy in the air between them, an invisible countdown ticking away the hours until nightfall. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the diner's windows as Sarah and Jax sat in a corner booth, speaking in hushed tones. The lunch rush had ended, leaving them in relative privacy. Jax's shoulders were tense, his hands wrapped tightly around a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. "I can't stay," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You heard their threat. They'll be here by nightfall." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. "Listen to me, Jax. I have an idea." She pulled out her phone, showing him a map. "My cousin Tommy lives in Cedar Grove, about 3 hours north of here. It's a tiny town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone." She zoomed in on the location. "He owns a garage there. He's always looking for help." Jax shook his head. "Sarah, I can't drag your family into this. Tommy owes me a favor," she insisted. "He won't ask questions. I already called him." She reached across the table, her hand covering his. "He's willing to pick you up at the bus station outside town. You'll be gone before they even know where to look." "And what about you?" Jax's voice cracked slightly. "They know where you work, where you live. Once you're gone, they'll have no reason to bother with me." Sarah tried to sound confident, though doubt flickered in her eyes. "I'm nobody to them." Jax pulled his hand away, running it through his beard in frustration. "You don't know these people like I do. They don't think like that. They'll want to make an example. Then we'll deal with that if it happens," Sarah cut him off. "But right now, we need to get you out of here." The diner's bell chimed as a customer entered, making them both jump. It was just Mrs. Henderson, a regular, but the moment reminded them of the urgency of their situation. Sarah pulled out a small envelope. "I got you a bus ticket. The station's about 30 minutes away. Tommy will meet you there at 7. Jax stared at the envelope, his expression torn. "Sarah, I can't take your money." "You can, and you will." Her voice was firm. "Consider it an investment in your future." The word future hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Jax looked at her, really looked at her, taking in her determined expression, the way her hands trembled slightly despite her brave words. "I don't want to go," he admitted quietly. "These past few days." He trailed off, unable to find the right words. Sarah's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I know, but we don't have a choice." Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Time was running out. Jax stood slowly, his decision visible in the set of his shoulders. "I should get my things." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She watched as he walked to the back room, where he'd been keeping his few possessions. Each step he took seemed to physically pain him, but they both knew it was the only way. When he returned with his small bag, Sarah was waiting by the diner's back door, car keys in hand. "I'll drive you to the station," she said softly. Jax paused in the doorway, looking back at the diner one last time. This small, humble place that had somehow become a sanctuary, and the woman who had shown him more kindness than he'd known in years. The weight of leaving felt almost unbearable, but the memory of the threatening phone call steeled his resolve. He couldn't let them hurt her. He wouldn't. "Let's go," he said quietly, following Sarah into the gathering dusk. Sarah woke before dawn, her mind already racing with the day's urgent plans. The sky outside her apartment window was still dark, tinged with the first hints of morning gray. She moved quietly through her small kitchen, not wanting to wake Jax, who slept on her worn couch. Coffee would have to wait. She needed to check if her car had enough gas for the drive to the bus station. Grabbing her keys from the counter, she headed toward her front door. Something made her pause before opening it. Years of working late shifts had taught her to trust her instincts. Sarah moved to the window instead, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. Her heart nearly stopped. In the dim light of the street lamps, she could make out 3 men lounging against a black SUV. They weren't even trying to hide. One of them was smoking, the ember of his cigarette glowing in the darkness. Their leather jackets and the way they carried themselves told her everything she needed to know. Sarah backed away from the window, her hands shaking. She hurried to the living room, where Jax lay sleeping. "Jax," she whispered urgently, touching his shoulder. "Jax, wake up." He was instantly alert, years of street life having honed his reflexes. "What's wrong?" "They're outside," Sarah said, keeping her voice low. "3 of them, by a black SUV. Jax's face hardened. He got up and moved silently to the window, staying hidden behind the curtain as he looked out. "Damn it," he muttered. "That's Rico's car. They must have been watching the diner yesterday." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "Is there another way out of the building?" "The fire escape through my bedroom window." They moved quickly, gathering what little they needed. Jax insisted Sarah take nothing but her purse and keys. "The less we carry, the faster we move," he explained. They had almost reached her bedroom when heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway outside her apartment. A loud knock made them both freeze. "We know you're in there, Hawk," a gruff voice called out. Sarah and Jax exchanged glances. Without a word, they moved faster toward the bedroom. Sarah opened the window as quietly as she could, wincing at every small squeak of the old frame. The knocking became more insistent. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jax helped Sarah onto the fire escape first, then followed. They descended as quickly as they dared, the metal structure creaking beneath their weight. Above them, they heard the sound of her apartment door being kicked in. They reached the bottom of the fire escape and ran toward Sarah's car, parked in the back lot. They were almost there when shouts erupted behind them. There they are. Heavy footsteps pounded on pavement as the gang members ran to cut them off. Sarah and Jax reached her car just as 3 men surrounded them. "End of the line, Hawk," said a tall man with a scarred face. "Boss wants a word with you." "I'm done, Rico," Jax said, positioning himself between the men and Sarah. "Tell Marcus I'm out." Rico's face darkened. "Nobody's out unless the boss says they're out. You know that." "Times change," Jax replied, his voice steady despite the tension. "Get in the car," Rico ordered, taking a step forward. "Or maybe we'll take your little girlfriend for a ride instead." Sarah felt Jax tense beside her. In one fluid motion, he snatched her car keys, unlocked the door, and pushed her inside. Before Rico could react, Jax was in the driver's seat, starting the engine. The car roared to life as Rico lunged forward. Jax threw it in reverse, tires squealing against pavement. Sarah held on as they peeled out of the parking lot, Rico's angry shouts fading behind them. Through the rearview mirror, they could see the men running back to their SUV. They weren't giving up. The hunt was on. The morning sun cast long shadows across the highway as Sarah's car sped down the empty road. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. They'd switched drivers an hour ago when Jax's injuries started bothering him again. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. "I never wanted this life," Jax said suddenly, breaking the quiet. He was staring out the passenger window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. "Got pulled in when I was just a kid. Thought it meant family, you know?" Sarah glanced at him, noting the pain in his voice. "How old were you?" 15. Mom was gone. Dad was drunk most days." He shifted in his seat, wincing. "Marcus, the gang leader, he took me in, gave me food, clothes, somewhere to sleep. Didn't realize the price I'd have to pay." Sarah's throat tightened. "That must have been hard." "Yeah." Jax rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "First few years weren't so bad. But then things changed. Marcus changed. Started dealing harder drugs, getting into weapons. By then, I was in too deep." The road stretched endlessly before them. Sarah thought about her own struggles, different but somehow similar. "I understand being trapped," she said softly. "After Dad died, Mom got sick. I had all these dreams, college, maybe opening my own restaurant someday. But life had other plans." "You're good at taking care of people," Jax observed. "Even strays like me." Sarah managed a small smile. "Dad always said kindness matters most when it's hardest to give." They drove in companionable silence for a while, both lost in thought. The highway gave way to smaller roads, then to a winding path through dense forest. "My grandmother's cabin is just up ahead," Sarah said, turning onto a narrow dirt road. Nobody's been here in years, but it should be safe for now. The cabin appeared through the trees, small but solid, its wooden walls weathered by time. Sarah parked behind it, hiding the car from the road. Her hands were shaking as she turned off the engine. Inside, dust covered everything. Old furniture sat draped in sheets, looking like pale ghosts in the dim light. Sarah found some candles in a kitchen drawer while Jax checked the perimeter. "Windows are secure," he reported, coming back inside. "Place is pretty isolated. Should be okay for tonight at least." Sarah nodded, lighting a candle. The flame cast dancing shadows on the walls. "There's a bedroom upstairs. You should take it. Your ribs need proper rest." "Sarah." Jax's voice was gentle. "Thank you. For everything. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you helped me that night." She looked at him in the candlelight, seeing past the tattoos and scars to the person beneath. Someone who'd been hurt, just like her, but was still trying to find his way to something better. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "Any of it." The cabin creaked around them, settling in the cooling evening air. They ate a simple meal from the supplies they'd grabbed during their escape. Then Sarah found some old blankets and chest. As night fell, they sat in the living room, listening to the sounds of the forest through the open windows. The darkness felt like a protective blanket, hiding them from the world that wanted to tear them apart. For now, in this moment, they were safe. Morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting warm patches across the cabin's wooden floor. Sarah stood at the old stove, coaxing it to life with some kindling she'd found in a box by the fireplace. The smell of coffee from her emergency supplies filled the small space. Jax emerged from upstairs, his steps careful on the creaking wood. His bruises had faded to a mottled yellow-green, and he moved with less pain than before. "Something smells good. Found some coffee in my bag," Sarah said, pouring 2 cups. "And there's still some bread and peanut butter left." They sat at the small kitchen table, the morning quiet broken only by birdsong outside. It felt different here, away from the city's constant noise and pressure. "Peaceful. Tell me about your grandmother," Jax said, breaking off a piece of bread. "This was her place?" Sarah smiled, memories washing over her. "Yeah, she was amazing, tough as nails but so kind. She'd come up here to paint. Said the forest helped her think clearly." She gestured to a faded landscape hanging on the wall. "That's one of hers." "She was good," Jax said, studying the painting. "I used to draw, you know, before everything." "Really?" Sarah leaned forward, interested. "What did you draw?" "Comics mostly. Superheroes." He laughed softly. "Ironic, right? Drawing heroes while becoming the opposite." "You're not the opposite," Sarah said firmly. "You're trying to change. That matters." The day unfolded slowly around them. They found a deck of cards in a drawer and played gin rummy, sharing stories between hands. Jax told her about his first motorcycle, how free he felt riding it. Sarah described her dream restaurant. Small, cozy, serving comfort food made with love. In the afternoon, they sat on the cabin's back porch, watching sunlight dance through the leaves. Sarah had found some old photo albums, and they flipped through them together. "Look at this one," she said, pointing to a photo of a little girl in overalls covered in mud. "That's me, trying to help Dad build a treehouse. Mom was so mad about the mess." Jack smiled, genuinely smiled, and Sarah realized she'd never seen him do that before. It transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges life had carved into him. "I like it here," he said quietly. "It's like the world can't touch us." "I know what you mean," Sarah replied. "It's nice to just be." As evening approached, they made a simple dinner from their dwindling supplies. Sarah told funny stories about her worst days at the diner. The customer who ordered scrambled eggs but insisted they weren't scrambled enough, the time she accidentally served decaf to the morning rush crowd. The sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks visible through the trees. Sarah curled up on the old couch, wrapped in one of her grandmother's quilts. The day's peace and quiet had taken their toll, and soon her breathing evened out into sleep. Jack sat in the armchair across from her, watching the last light fade from the windows. He studied Sarah's face, peaceful in sleep, and felt something shift inside him. Here was someone who had seen him at his worst, broken, bloodied, desperate, and still chose to help. Still believed he could be better. For the first time since he was 15, Jax felt like he had choices. Real choices, not just survival. Looking at Sarah, he could almost see a different kind of life. One without violence, without always looking over his shoulder. One where he could be the person she seemed to see in him. The crunch of tires on gravel jolted Sarah awake. Beside her, Jax was already moving, his body tense and alert. He pressed a finger to his lips and motioned for her to stay low. The rumble of an engine grew louder, echoing through the quiet forest morning. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she crouched behind the couch. Jax had positioned himself near the window, his back against the wall, carefully peering through a gap in the dusty curtains. The sound grew closer, and Sarah could feel every beat of her pulse. The engine noise peaked, and then slowly faded as the vehicle passed by on the main road. Sarah let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Jax's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the worried crease between his eyebrows remained. "Just a logging truck," he said quietly, but his voice was tight with tension. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the morning sunshine streaming through the windows. The peaceful bubble they'd created yesterday had burst. Reality came rushing back. They were fugitives, hiding from people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt them. "We can't stay here," she said, voicing what they both knew. "They'll find us eventually." Jax nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant to drag you into this mess." "Stop apologizing," she said firmly, standing up and straightening her wrinkled clothes. "I made my own choices." She walked to the kitchen and started gathering their few belongings. "We need a plan. I could try heading north," Jack suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe Canada." Sarah paused in her packing, a can of coffee halfway to her bag. "No," she said, surprising herself with how certain she felt. "Running isn't the answer. We need to face this." "Sarah," Jax's voice held a warning note. "Listen to me." She turned to face him. "The diner. It's the last place they'd expect us to go. They'll be looking for us to run, to hide somewhere far away." She grew more animated as she spoke. "Plus, I know every inch of that place. The layout, the back exits, the storage rooms. If we need to hide or escape quickly, we have options." Jax considered her words, his expression thoughtful. "It's risky," he said finally, "but you might be right about them not expecting it." They packed quickly, erasing all signs of their presence from the cabin. Sarah took one last look at her grandmother's painting, touching the frame gently before shouldering her bag. The morning air was crisp as they stepped outside, dew still clinging to the grass. At the car, Jax hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" "The diner. It's your life. If something happens—" "It's just a building," Sarah said, though her heart ached at the thought of anything happening to it. "We'll figure this out together." She reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. Sometimes the safest place is right where you started. Jax looked at their joined hands for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Okay," he said. "The diner it is." They loaded their bags into the car, and Sarah took one last look at the cabin that had given them their brief respite. Then she started the engine, and they began their journey back to where it all began. The familiar bell above the diner's door chimed as Sarah unlocked it, the sound hollow in the pre-dawn silence. Streetlights cast long shadows through the windows, making the empty restaurant feel like a stage waiting for its actors. Her footsteps echoed against the linoleum floor as she made her way to the light switch. "Feels strange being back," Jack said quietly, following her inside. His eyes scanned every corner of the room, checking the shadows. Old habits died hard. Sarah nodded, trying to shake off the eerie feeling settling over her. "Help me get the coffee started?" she asked, needing something normal to focus on. The routine would help steady her nerves. They moved around each other in the small kitchen space, their movements careful and measured. Sarah wiped down counters while Jax filled the coffee maker. The familiar scent of brewing coffee gradually filled the air, but it couldn't quite mask the tension. Every car that passed outside made them freeze. Every unexpected sound had Jax's head snapping up, his body tensing like a coiled spring. Sarah found herself holding her breath each time, only releasing it when the sound proved harmless. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, Jax muttered, pausing in his task of arranging chairs. His knuckles were white where he gripped the back of one. Sarah stopped wiping tables and straightened up. "It's better than running forever," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. She walked over to him and touched his arm. "We just need to—" A sharp crack from outside cut her off. They both spun toward the sound, hearts racing. But it was just a newspaper delivery truck backfiring as it passed. Jax let out a shaky breath. "This is making me crazy," he admitted. "Every sound." "I know," Sarah said softly. She returned to her cleaning, but her hands weren't quite steady. The sky outside was beginning to lighten when Sarah first smelled the smoke. At first, she thought it was just the coffee maker, but then Jax's head shot up, his nostrils flaring. "Something's burning," he said sharply. The smell grew stronger, and then Sarah saw it. Orange flames licking up the side of the building through the kitchen window. The fire was spreading fast, climbing the old wooden walls like hungry fingers. "Sarah!" Jax's voice was urgent. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the front door. "We need to get out. Now!" The heat was already intense, and smoke was beginning to fill the diner. Sarah could hear the crackle and pop of wood being devoured by flames. Everything was happening so fast, too fast to process. "My mother's photo." Sarah tried to turn back toward the counter where the framed picture sat, but Jax's grip was firm. "No time," he shouted over the roar of the flames. They burst through the front door just as the windows began to shatter from the heat. The cool morning air hit Sarah's face like a slap, and she stumbled, coughing. Jax caught her, pulling her further from the building. They stood in the parking lot, watching helplessly as the flames consumed the diner. The heat reached them even from this distance, and Sarah could feel tears streaming down her face. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built, gone up in smoke in mere minutes. In the distance, sirens began to wail, but Sarah knew it was too late. The gang had found them, and they made their message crystal clear. Sarah stood motionless in the parking lot, watching as firefighters battled the last of the flames. The morning sun cast an eerily beautiful glow through the smoke that still rose from the charred remains of her diner. The acrid smell of burnt wood and melted plastic filled the air, making her eyes water, or maybe those were just more tears. "All those years," she whispered, her voice rough from smoke. "Everything I worked for." Her legs felt weak, and she swayed slightly where she stood. Jax steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is all my fault." His voice was heavy with guilt, and when she looked up at him, she saw the pain etched across his face. A firefighter approached them, removing his helmet. "Ma'am, it looks like arson. We found evidence of accelerant around the building's perimeter." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "The police will want to talk to you." Sarah nodded numbly, but Jax tensed beside her. They both knew they couldn't stick around for questions. The gang wouldn't stop here. This was just their opening move. Once the firefighter walked away, Jax turned to her. "We can't stay here," he said urgently. "They'll come back, and next time it won't just be the diner." Sarah pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold back a sob. "Where would we even go? This is all I have had." She corrected herself, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. "My mother's in the nursing home here. My whole life is here." "Your life won't be worth anything if they find us," Jax said softly. He gently pulled her hands away from her face, forcing her to look at him. "I've seen what they're capable of. We need to leave town." A police siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the choice before her wasn't really a choice at all. Stay and face certain danger, or leave everything behind. "My mother," she said again, her voice breaking. "We'll figure something out," Jax promised. "Maybe we can arrange to move her somewhere safer too. But right now, we need to go." Sarah looked back at the smoking ruins of her diner one last time. The place where she'd spent countless hours serving coffee, where she'd built relationships with regular customers, where she'd dreamed of someday owning it herself. It was all gone now. "I don't know if I can start over," she admitted, her voice small and uncertain. Jax took her hand in his grip warm and reassuring. You won't have to do it alone, he said firmly. I'll help you rebuild, whatever it takes. We'll find somewhere new, somewhere they can't find us. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Jax's face. Despite everything, despite the loss and fear and uncertainty, she felt something stir in her chest, a tiny spark of hope. You do that? She asked. Help me start over? After everything you've done for me? Jax squeezed her hand. Sarah, I'd do anything to help you. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. Now let me help you. The police sirens were getting closer. Sarah took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and nodded. Okay, she said. Let's go. Together, they walked quickly to Sarah's car, leaving behind the smoldering remains of her old life. As they drove away, Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The smoke was still rising against the morning sky, but somehow it didn't seem quite as devastating anymore. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from these ashes. The small town of Cedar Grove sat nestled between rolling hills, a world away from the life they'd left behind. Sarah's old sedan crawled down Main Street, her eyes scanning the storefronts until she spotted what they were looking for, a weathered for sale sign in the window of an old brick building. There it is, she said, pulling into the empty parking lot. The building had clearly seen better days. Paint peeled from the wooden trim, and a few window panes were cracked. But the bones of the place were solid, and the location was perfect, right in the heart of downtown. Jax climbed out of the car, his boots crunching on the gravel. It's got potential, he said, running a hand along the brick wall. Needs work, but nothing we can't handle. Sarah joined him, pulling out the keys they'd gotten from the real estate agent. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the front door. The bell above jingled, sending a shower of dust down on them as they stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, illuminating the empty space. Old checkered floor tiles stretched across the room, and a long counter ran along one wall, complete with vintage bar stools that had seen better days. The kitchen area behind the counter was bare except for a few ancient appliances. It's perfect, Sarah whispered, her voice echoing in the empty space. She could already see in her mind fresh paint, clean windows, new equipment, tables filled with customers, the smell of coffee and fresh-baked pies in the air. Jax watched her face light up, a small smile playing at his lips. You really think we can make this work? I know we can. Sarah moved to the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. It needs a lot of love, but... She paused, running her hand along the dusty counter. This feels right. They spent the rest of the morning taking measurements and making lists. Jax's construction experience came in handy as he examined the electrical system and plumbing. Sarah mapped out where everything would go: the kitchen equipment, the dining area, even a small corner for a dessert display case. By afternoon, they'd started clearing out the old equipment. Jax muscled an ancient refrigerator toward the door while Sarah scrubbed years of grime from the windows. The work was hard, but there was something therapeutic about it. Each clean window, each cleared space felt like washing away the past. You know, Sarah said, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, a month ago, I never would have imagined this. She looked around at their progress. Already the place felt lighter, more alive. I was so stuck in my routine, just trying to get by day after day. Jack set down the box he was carrying. Life has a funny way of pushing us where we need to go, he said, even if the path getting there isn't exactly smooth. Sarah nodded, thinking about everything they'd been through, the violence, the fire, leaving everything behind. Yet here they were, starting fresh. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they felt distant now, overshadowed by hope and possibility. Thank you, she said softly, for being here, for helping me rebuild. Jax crossed the room to stand beside her, their shoulders touching as they looked out the newly cleaned window at their new hometown. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, he said simply. Together, they watched the afternoon sun paint the brick buildings across the street in warm golden light. The small town buzzed with quiet activity, people walking dogs, running errands, living their lives. Soon, Sarah thought, they'd be part of this community too. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a long while, she was excited to see what the next page would bring. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the newly cleaned windows of their future diner. Sarah was wiping down the vintage counter while Jax worked on fixing a loose floorboard near the entrance. The rhythmic sound of his hammer filled the empty space, mixing with the gentle hum of traffic outside. The bell above the door jingled, making them both look up. A young boy, no more than 12, stood in the doorway clutching an envelope. "Got a delivery for Jackson Hawk," the boy said, his voice trembling slightly. Jax's hammer clattered to the floor. He exchanged a quick glance with Sarah before approaching the boy. "That's me." The boy thrust the envelope forward and darted away without another word. Jax's hand shook as he tore open the envelope. A single photograph fell out, landing face up on the checkered floor. It showed their old diner engulfed in flames, and on the back was a message written in bold black marker. "You can run, but you can't hide. Come back, or the next fire won't be so merciful." Sarah's face drained of color as she read the message over Jax's shoulder. "How do they find us?" Jax crumpled the photo in his fist. "They've got connections everywhere. I should have known they wouldn't let me go this easily." His voice was tight with anger and fear. Sarah sank onto one of the old bar stools, her legs suddenly weak. "What are we going to do?" Jax paced the length of the counter, his boots echoing in the empty space. Maybe I should go back. Just long enough to make them understand I'm done." "No." Sarah stood up so quickly the stool toppled over. "You can't go back. They'll never let you leave again." "I can't let them hurt you, Sarah." Jax's voice cracked. "Everything I touch turns to ash. First the old diner, now this." He gestured around at their half-finished renovation. "You deserve better than living in fear." Sarah crossed the room and grabbed his hands, forcing him to stop pacing. "Listen to me, Jackson Hawk. I knew what I was getting into when I helped you that night in the alley. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But, no buts." She squeezed his hands tighter. "We're in this together now. If you go back to them, they win. They'll know they can control you through threats and violence. Is it the life you want?" Jax's shoulders slumped. "Of course not. But what choice do we have?" Sarah's eyes blazed with determination. "We have plenty of choices. We can go to the police, get protection. We can fight back legally. But what we're not going to do is let them bully you back into that life." Jax looked down at their joined hands, then around at the space they'd started to make their own. The fresh paint samples on the wall, the blueprint for the kitchen layout spread across the counter, the stack of menus Sarah had started designing. It represented more than just a business. It was their future, their chance at something real. "You're right," he said finally. "I can't go back. Not now, not ever." He pulled Sarah closer, resting his forehead against hers. "But we need to be smart about this. They're not going to stop just because we want them to." "Then we'll face them together," Sarah said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. But you're not facing it alone anymore." The threat of the gang loomed over them like a dark cloud, but something had shifted in Jax's expression. The uncertainty was replaced by resolve. He knew what he had to do. Find a way to break free from his past completely, not just for himself, but for the future he and Sarah were building together. The neon sign of Pete's Bar flickered in the early morning darkness, casting an eerie red glow across the empty parking lot. Jax stood beside his motorcycle, his heart pounding against his ribs. He knew the gang would be inside. They always gathered here before sunrise, planning their next moves. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy wooden door. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hit him immediately. Around a pool table in the back, 5 men looked up from their game. Their leader, Marcus, a hulking figure with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, straightened up slowly. "Well," Marcus drawled, setting his pool cue aside. "Look who finally decided to come home." Jax walked forward, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "I'm not here to come home, Marcus. I'm here to end this." The other men moved to surround him, but Marcus held up his hand, stopping them. "In what, brother? You're one of us. Always have been, always will be. Not anymore." Jax's voice was steady, despite the tension crackling in the air. "I'm done. Done with the violence. Done with the fear. I'm building something real now, something that matters." A burst of laughter erupted from the group. Something real? Marcus sneered. What? That little diner with your waitress girlfriend. That's not real, Jax. This is real. He gestured to the men around him. We're your family. Family doesn't burn down innocent people's businesses, Jax shot back. Family doesn't threaten and destroy. You're not family. You're a prison. Marcus's face darkened. Watch your mouth, boy. You're walking a dangerous line. No, Jax stood his ground. I'm done walking lines. I'm done playing by your rules. Kill me if you want, but I'm not coming back. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stepped closer, his face inches from Jax's. You think you can just walk away? After everything we've done for you. Done for me? Jax didn't back down. You've done nothing but drag me deeper into the dirt. I was lost when I found you, but now I know exactly who I am and what I want. And what's that? Marcus spat. Peace, Jax replied simply. A life without looking over my shoulder. A chance to be someone better than what you made me. Marcus studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The other men shifted uncomfortably, waiting for their leader's reaction. Finally, Marcus stepped back. You really mean it, don't you? You're really choosing that life over us. Yes, Jack said firmly, and nothing you do or say will change that. To everyone's surprise, including Jax's, Marcus began to laugh. Not a mocking laugh, but something deeper, almost sad. You know what? I always knew you were different, Jax. Too soft for this life, even when you try to be hard. He turned to his men. Let him go. Boss, one of them questioned. You heard me. Marcus turned back to Jax. Get out of here. But remember, you leave this life behind completely. No coming back, no favors, no nothing. You're dead to us. Jax nodded slowly, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. He backed toward the door, expecting at any moment for someone to change their mind, to pull a weapon, to stop him. But nobody moved. He reached the door and pushed it open, stepping out into the pale morning light. Each step away from the bar felt like shedding a heavy weight from his shoulders. He walked to his bike, swung his leg over the seat, and started the engine. Behind him, the bar door remained closed. The neon sign continued to flicker, but it no longer felt threatening. It was just another sign in another part of town, in a life he was leaving behind. The morning sun streamed through the newly installed windows of the diner, casting long rectangles of light across the worn wooden floor. Jax stood in the doorway, watching Sarah arrange mismatched coffee cups on the freshly painted shelves. His heart felt lighter than it had in years. You're really free? Sarah asked again, her voice soft with disbelief. She set down the cup she was holding and turned to face him. Really free, Jax confirmed, crossing the room to join her. Then let me go. Just like that. Sarah's eyes welled with tears as she wrapped her arms around him. I was so worried, she whispered against his chest. The bell above the door chimed, and they turned to see Mike, the local hardware store owner, carrying boxes of supplies. Got those light fixtures you ordered? He called out cheerfully. And Martha from the bakery next door wants to know if you need help painting the exterior. That would be amazing, Sarah said, wiping her eyes quickly. Tell her we'll be working on it tomorrow morning. The whole town had rallied around them since they'd arrived. What started as suspicious glances at Jax's tattoos had turned into genuine acceptance when people saw how hard they worked. The old building, once an eyesore on Main Street, was slowly transforming. Jax grabbed his tools and got to work installing the new lighting while Sarah scrubbed years of grime from the ancient coffee machine they'd salvaged. The routine they'd fallen into felt natural, him handling the repairs, her organizing and planning, both of them learning to trust in this new life they were building. Hey, called Tommy, a local teenager who'd been helping them after school. My dad says he's got some extra chairs in his storage unit. They're old but sturdy. Want me to bring them by? Sarah's face lit up. That would be perfect. We're still short on seating. Throughout the day, more townspeople dropped by. Mrs. Chun from the flower shop brought over some potted plants for the windowsills. Bill, the retired carpenter, spent hours helping Jax repair the wobbly tables. Even the mayor stopped in, promising to be their first customer when they opened. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Sarah stood in the middle of the diner, taking it all in. The walls were a warm yellow now. The counter gleamed with fresh polish, and the new light fixtures cast a welcoming glow. It wasn't fancy. The furniture didn't match, the floors still had some scuff marks, and the menu board was hand-painted. But it was theirs. "Ready?" Jax asked, holding up the open sign they'd found at a flea market. Sarah nodded, her eyes shining. Together, they hung it in the window, stepping back to admire how it caught the last rays of sunlight. "It's really happening," Sarah whispered, squeezing Jax's hand. She looked around at their little diner, at the coffee cups waiting to be filled, the fresh flowers on every table, the stack of menus by the register. It wasn't just a business. It was a dream coming true, a place where people could gather and feel at home. "Welcome to Sarah's," she said softly, testing out the name they'd chosen. The words felt right, like they belonged here, just as she and Jax did. Through the window, they could see people already gathering, eager to be part of the diner's first day. Sarah straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and reached for the door. The evening had settled into a comfortable rhythm as Sarah moved between the tables, refilling coffee cups and sharing smiles with their guests. The diner hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against plates. Through the windows, streetlights cast a warm glow onto the freshly painted walls, making the whole place feel like it was glowing from within. "This pot roast is just like my grandmother used to make," Mrs. Chen said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "You've got magic in your kitchen, Sarah." Sarah beamed at the compliment. "That means so much coming from you." She glanced over at Jax, who was showing Tommy how to work the new dishwasher. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing his tattoos, but now they seemed less like marks of his past and more like part of who he was, someone who had fought his way to a better life. Mike from the hardware store raised his coffee cup. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice carrying across the diner. The conversations quieted as everyone turned to listen. "To Sarah and Jax for bringing this old place back to life and giving our town something special." "Hear, hear," the crowd echoed, lifting their cups and glasses. Sarah felt her eyes welling up as she looked around at their supporters. Bill the carpenter had brought his entire family. Martha from the bakery had contributed a beautiful cake decorated with "Welcome to Sarah's" in elegant frosting. Even the mayor sat in the corner booth, enjoying a slice of apple pie. Jax made his way to Sarah's side, slipping an arm around her waist. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it," she corrected him, leaning into his embrace. As the evening wore on, the crowd thinned until only a few regulars remained. The mayor stopped by their table on his way out, shaking both their hands. "This town needed something like this," he said warmly. "A place where everyone feels welcome." After the last guest left, Sarah and Jax sat at the counter, sharing the remaining slice of Martha's cake. The diner was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock above the door. "I never thought I'd have this," Jax admitted, looking around at their creation. The yellow walls seemed to glow in the dim light, and the fresh flowers on the tables still perfumed the air. "A place where I belong." Sarah reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I always dreamed of having my own diner, but this is better than anything I imagined. It's not just about the place, it's about the people, the community." She paused, looking into his eyes. "It's about us. Remember that first night you found me in the alley?" Jax asked, his voice soft with memory. "How could I forget? I was terrified," Sarah chuckled. "But something told me I had to help you." "You saved my life that night," Jax said seriously. "Not just by getting me off the street, but by showing me there was another way to live." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling the roughness of his calluses against her palm. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the proof of what they'd built together. Not just a diner, but a future neither of them had dared to hope for before they found each other. The morning sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. Sarah watched as Jax moved through his morning routine, filling salt shakers and wiping down tables with careful attention. His movements were different now, more relaxed, more at peace. The tension that had once lined his shoulders had melted away, replaced by an easy confidence that made her heart flutter. "Coffee's ready," she called from behind the counter, pouring him a cup just the way he liked it, black with just a hint of sugar. Jax looked up and smiled, that special smile he saved just for her. "You always know exactly what I need," he said, making his way to the counter. His hands, once instruments of violence, now moved with gentle precision as he accepted the mug from her. Sarah felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest as their fingers brushed. These small moments had become precious to her. The quiet mornings before opening, the shared glances across the busy diner, the way they moved in perfect sync during the lunch rush. "I've been thinking," she said, watching him take a sip. "About us." "Yeah." His eyes met hers over the rim of his coffee cup. "Remember when we first started fixing this place up?" She gestured around the diner. "How impossible it all seemed." Jax chuckled, setting down his mug, like trying to bring a desert back to life. But look at it now. The diner had become everything they dreamed of and more. The worn-out booths had been replaced with comfortable new ones, the walls painted a warm yellow that seemed to hold the sunlight. Photos of their regular customers lined one wall, a testament to the community they'd built. "We did that together," Sarah said softly. "And I've realized something. This place, it's not just about serving food or making money. It's about creating a home." Jax reached across the counter and took her hand. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "When I found you that night," she continued, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach, "I was just trying to help someone in need. I never imagined I'd find this. Us." The morning light caught the silver in Jax's beard as he smiled. A few strands of gray had appeared in the past months, and Sarah loved them. They were proof of the peace he'd found, the stress he'd left behind. "You changed everything for me," he said quietly. "Gave me a reason to be better, to want more from life." Sarah took a deep breath. "I want to build a life with you, Jax. Not just the diner, but everything. A home, a family, a future. I'm ready for all of it." The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Jax's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Sarah saw that same vulnerable look she'd glimpsed when she first found him, a man afraid to hope for too much. "Sarah," his voice was rough with emotion. He came around the counter, never letting go of her hand. "Are you sure? After everything?" She turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I've never been more sure of anything. We've faced down your past, rebuilt from ashes, and created something beautiful together. I want to keep building, keep growing, keep loving you more each day." Jax pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. The familiar scent of coffee and his aftershave enveloped her, and Sarah felt that sense of rightness, of coming home, that she'd only ever found with him. Sarah leaned against the diner's counter, watching the morning light dance across the freshly polished surfaces. Every corner of this place held a memory, some bitter, some sweet, all part of their journey. Her fingers traced the edge of a small crack in the countertop, one they decided to keep as a reminder of where they'd started. The memory of that first night came rushing back, finding Jax broken and bloodied in that dark alley, making the split-second decision that would change both their lives forever. She remembered the fear, not just of helping a stranger with gang tattoos, but of allowing herself to care for someone when she'd spent so long just trying to survive. The old diner's destruction had felt like the end of everything at the time. She could still smell the smoke, feel the heat of the flames that had threatened to destroy not just the building, but their dreams. Yet somehow, that loss had led them here to this stronger, more beautiful version of their shared vision. "Penny for your thoughts." Jax's voice pulled her from a reverie. He stood beside her now, his presence as steady and reassuring as always. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she said, turning to face him. "Remember when you could barely look me in the eye? Now look at you, greeting customers, making jokes with the regulars." Jax's laugh was soft and warm. "Yeah, well, turns out there's more to life than looking tough and keeping everyone at arm's length." He glanced around the diner, pride evident in his eyes. "You taught me that." Sarah reached for his hand, studying the tattoos that once seemed so threatening. Now, they were just part of him, marks of a past that had shaped but no longer defined him. "We taught each other," she corrected. "I was so focused on just getting by, on taking care of everyone else, that I'd forgotten how to let anyone take care of me. Through the window, they could see their regular customers starting to gather outside, waiting for opening time. Mrs. Henderson was first in line, as always, ready for her morning coffee and crossword puzzle. Behind her, Tom from the hardware store chatted with Maria, who ran the flower shop next door. "Look at them," Sarah said softly. "They're not just customers anymore. They're family. We've built something real here, something that matters." Jax squeezed her hand. "You know what amazes me? How you saw possibility when everyone else just saw broken things. A beaten-up biker, a burned-down diner. You looked at the mess and saw hope." Sarah felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but they were happy tears. The kind that came from feeling so full of joy it had to spill over somewhere. That's what love does, I guess. It helps you see past the surface, past the scars, to what could be. The morning sun streamed through the windows now, bathing everything in a warm, golden light. It caught the silver in Jax's beard, the gleam of the coffee machines, the polished surface of the tables they'd restored together. Everything looked touched by magic, transformed by the light. "We've made it, haven't we?" Jax asked, his voice thick with emotion as he stood beside her. Sarah smiled, holding his hand tighter. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light, a promise of the future they would build together. It was clear now. They had finally found their place in the world. The morning rush at the diner had become a well-choreographed dance. Sarah moved between tables with practiced ease, while Jax worked the grill with a focus that still surprised their regular customers. The tattoos on his arms were visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves as he flipped pancakes and scrambled eggs. But nobody seemed scared of him anymore. If anything, the locals had come to see him as their own gentle giant. "Order up," Jax called out, his voice carrying over the comfortable buzz of conversation. Sarah grabbed the plates, pausing to give him a quick smile before delivering breakfast to the waiting customers. The diner had transformed into everything they'd hoped for and more. The walls, once bare and institutional, now displayed local artwork and photographs of the town. Plants hung in macrame holders near the windows, their green leaves catching the sunlight. The counter, where Sarah had spent so many hours worrying about bills and her mother's care, was now a gathering place where people shared stories and laughter. Mrs. Henderson sat in her usual spot, working on her crossword puzzle. "7 letters, dear," she called out to Sarah. "Word for new beginning." "Renewal," Sarah answered without hesitation, and the older woman beamed, penciling in the letters. Tom from the hardware store was teaching Jax about different types of wood for their next renovation project. They'd been slowly fixing up an old Victorian house on Maple Street, their new home. The porch still needed work, but the inside was nearly finished. During a quiet moment, Sarah watched Jax interact with their customers. His shoulders were relaxed now, the tension that had once seemed permanent finally gone. He caught her looking and winked, making her blush like they were still in those early days. The afternoon lull gave them a chance to catch their breath. They'd hired 2 part-time waitresses and a dishwasher, which meant they could actually take breaks together now. Sarah made them both coffee, black for him, cream and sugar for her, and they sat at their favorite corner table. "Maria asked if we'd host the town council meeting next week," Sarah said, warming her hands around her coffee mug. "Can you believe it? They used to cross the street when they saw us coming." Jax chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "Well, your cinnamon rolls have a way of changing people's minds about things." "Our cinnamon rolls," she corrected him. "Your recipe, my baking." He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. The simple gesture still made her heart skip a beat. "You know what I love most about this place?" he asked. "The coffee," she teased. "The peace," he said softly. "I never knew what that felt like before. Real peace, where you're not always looking over your shoulder or waiting for the other shoe to drop." Sarah squeezed his hand. She knew exactly what he meant. They'd built more than just a business here. They'd created a sanctuary, not just for themselves, but for anyone who needed it. Later that evening, they sat together on their partially finished porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of children playing and dogs barking. Sarah leaned against Jax's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Remember that night in the alley?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he replied, wrapping his arm around her. "Best mistake anyone ever made, coming to help a guy like me." "Best decision," she corrected him. "Not a mistake." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky. Their journey had been long and often painful, but here they were, together, finally home. The evening air was crisp and clean as Sarah and Jax walked hand in hand down Main Street. The setting sun cast long shadows across the brick buildings, many of which had been given fresh coats of paint in the past year. Window boxes overflowed with bright flowers, and the sidewalks were swept clean, signs of a community that took pride in itself. "Look," Sarah said, pointing to Miller's Hardware. Tom finally got his new sign up. The freshly painted sign gleamed in the golden light. Jack smiled, remembering how he'd helped Tom install it just yesterday. He said business is picking up. Lots of folks fixing up their places these days. They passed Jenny's bookstore, where a group of kids sat cross-legged in the window, listening to story time. The sight made Sarah's heart warm. When they first arrived, that building had been boarded up and forgotten. "Remember how quiet it used to be here?" she asked, squeezing Jax's hand. "Now there's life everywhere." Their diner stood at the corner, its windows glowing with welcoming light. Even closed for the evening, it seemed to pulse with energy. The chalk sign outside still displayed the day's specials in Sarah's neat handwriting, and fresh flowers brightened the windowsills. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Henderson setting up for tomorrow's book club meeting. She had a key now. They'd given copies to several trusted regulars who used the space for community gatherings after hours. Who would have thought? Jax mused, his voice soft with wonder. A guy like me, part of something like this? Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "A guy exactly like you," she corrected. "Someone who cares about people, who works hard, who wants to make things better." They crossed the street to the small park where they'd helped plant trees last spring. The saplings were still young, but they were growing strong and straight. Just like their love, Sarah thought, given time and care, it had grown into something beautiful and enduring. A few teenagers waved from the basketball court, kids who often came to the diner for breakfast before school. One of them was Tommy, who'd been struggling with math until Jack started tutoring him during slow afternoon shifts. "Did you ever think we have all this?" Sarah asked as they settled onto their favorite bench. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it must be a dream." Jax wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Better than any dream I ever had," he said. "Back then, I couldn't even imagine being this happy." The streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, as dusk settled over the town. Families were heading home for dinner, calling out friendly greetings as they passed. Mr. Chun from the grocery store stopped to chat briefly about the upcoming town festival, where their diner would be providing pies for the baking contest. Sarah watched it all with a full heart. The fear and uncertainty of their early days seemed like a distant memory now. The gang, the violence, the burning of the old diner, all of it had lost its power to hurt them. Those experiences had shaped them, yes, but they weren't defined by them anymore. "We're really home," she said softly, leaning into Jax's embrace. "Not just a place to stay, but really home." "Home," Jax repeated, the word carrying all the weight of their journey together. He looked down at Sarah, his eyes full of love and gratitude. "Never thought I'd know what that meant until I found you." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the front of Sarah and Jax's diner. The neon open sign had just been switched off, marking the end of another successful day. The fresh paint on the building's facade gleamed in the fading light, and the flower boxes Sarah had installed last spring were overflowing with colorful blooms. Jax stood beside Sarah, his strong arm wrapped around her waist. The day's work showed in the light dusting of flour on his black t-shirt, evidence of the morning's baking session. His tattoos, once symbols of a darker past, now seemed to tell a different story. They were part of who he was, but they no longer defined him. "Beautiful evening," Sarah said, leaning into him. She'd changed out of her work clothes into a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders. The breeze carried the lingering scents of coffee and fresh-baked bread from their kitchen. "Sure is," Jax agreed, his voice soft with contentment. He looked down at Sarah, marveling at how this woman had changed his life. Her kindness, her strength, her unwavering belief in him. It had transformed him in ways he never thought possible. The street was quiet now. Most shops closed for the day. A few people walked by, waving friendly hellos. Mrs. Thompson from the flower shop stopped to chat briefly about tomorrow's delivery, and Mr. Garcia from the hardware store called out a cheerful goodbye as he locked up his shop. Sarah watched a group of teenagers pass by, laughing and talking among themselves. She remembered how empty these streets had been when they first arrived. Now the whole neighborhood seemed alive with possibility. "Remember our first day here?" she asked, gesturing to the diner. "The broken windows, the leaky roof." Jax chuckled. "And that ancient stove that wouldn't light properly." He shook his head, smiling at the memory. "Took us 3 days just to get it working. But we did it," Sarah said, pride evident in her voice. "We fixed it all piece by piece." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. The streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, creating pools of warm light along the sidewalk. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the promise of summer. Sarah turned to face Jax, her eyes bright with emotion. She reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the scar near his temple, a reminder of a night she'd found him in that alley. So much had changed since then. They'd both grown stronger, braver, more certain of who they were and what they wanted. "This is just the start," she said, her voice full of hope and determination. Jax smiled down at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He understood what she meant. This wasn't just about the diner or even about them. It was about the life they'd built together, the community they'd become part of, the future stretching out before them. Together, they faced the future, knowing they'd earned it. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining with familiar comfort. Without another word, they walked inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.